Welcome to the video on balance sheet and understanding DeFi protocols capital structure. In this video, we are going to learn a tool in accounting known as the balance sheet and how to use it to understand DeFi protocols capital structure, which refers to the specific mix of debt and equity used to finance a protocol's assets and operations. Combining that with what we learned in the previous videos, we can use this to evaluate a protocol's liquidity and solvency positions. To start, let us first look at the accounting equation. It goes like this. Assets equals to liabilities plus equities. When we look at the assets of a protocol, it is usually tokens held in the treasury, and they can exist in many forms. One such example is stablecoins held within the treasury, or it could be other protocols tokens that is held within the treasury. Similarly, if the protocol is having a liquidity position in AMM such as Uniswap's Curve, those can be assets as well. Lastly, loans that are made to other protocols such as lending protocols like Aave Compound are also assets for the protocol. On the other side of the equation for liabilities, you see things like users deposit, which are payments or assets owed to individual users, or it could be debts owed to other protocols as well. And finally, for equities, which are amount owed to the owners of the protocol or the DAO, you usually see things like the governance tokens. Now that we have learned the accounting equation, we can look at how to construct a balance sheet for a hypothetical protocol. Let's take a look at this hypothetical protocol, which has the HYPE token. In this protocol, there is $20 million worth of USDC held in its treasury, alongside $20 million worth of USDC HYPE LP token held in the treasury. In addition, it also has $10 million worth of deposit in another yield farming protocol. In addition, it has $25 million that is payable to short-term bond holders of the protocol. Now, let's take a look at all of these numbers and put them onto a balance sheet. The balance sheet diagram is usually constructed by a T-shaped diagram with assets on the left-hand side and liabilities on the right-hand side. Since this protocol has a treasury of 3 different types of tokens, we will put all the 3 different types of tokens onto the assets. This is what the protocol has that has value. So on the first line, you'll see $20 million worth of USDC. On the second line, you'll see $20 million worth of LP tokens. On the third line, you see $10 million worth of deposits. And in total, you would have $50 million worth of asset on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, we only have a single line of $25 million worth of payments to short-term bond holders, since this is the only debt that the protocol owes. This also means that the total liabilities of this protocol is $25 million. At this point, you can see that on the left-hand side, it has $50 million worth of assets, while on the right-hand side, the protocol has $25 million worth of liabilities. If you look towards the accounting equation, you'll see that there is $25 million worth of equity left to balance on this balance sheet. At this point in time, we are ready to answer the first question, which is about the net worth of the protocol. If we look towards the assets and liability, you can see that after the protocol pays off all of its liabilities, it would be left with $25 million worth of assets. That also means that the protocol net worth is actually 25 million, and that is actually the equity of the protocol. Using the balance sheet, you can also answer simple questions about the value of governance tokens. Assuming that this hypothetical protocol issues 10 million of its own governance token, we can see what is the base value of each tokens. Now that we know that the protocol is worth $25 million, and if there are 10 billion tokens outstanding, that would also mean that each token is actually worth $2.5. Now, if we take a look at the next two questions on what if the protocol is said to grow by 50 times by the end of next year, would that change the value of the governance token? What if the protocol has a risk of being hacked for $20 million by the end of next year? Will that also change the value of the governance token? Here you can see that the balance sheet is only useful for determining the value of the governance token, or usually the shares of a company, when it is going through liquidation and not when it is growing and operating. For instance, if the protocol is said to grow 50 times by the end of next year, you would expect that the value of the governance token will be roughly 50 times more. And if the protocol has a risk of being hacked for $20 million, you can see that the net worth of the protocol would have been reduced to only $5 million. And then that would also mean that the governance token is only worth 50 cents each. While we can see that the balance sheet is running out of its depth when used to value the governance tokens, it is still helpful for us to get a fair valuation of what the governance token should be. Now, we can also use the balance sheet to answer the two stability constraints. First, is the protocol solvent? And remember, the definition of being solvent is having positive net worth. That means that the protocol has sufficient or excess of assets to pay off all of its liabilities. In this case, you can see that it has $50 million of assets and only $25 million worth of liabilities. The protocol is indeed solvent. Now, if we look at the other constraints on whether the protocol has liquidity, now we can see that it has $25 million of bonds, but yet we don't know if these bonds are payable in USDC or do the users accept other assets. So in the event that the users do not accept other assets and only want USDC as payments, you can see that the protocol only has $20 million worth of USDC at this point in time. That means it is unable to make its payments obligation. But remember, when we were talking about the liquidity in the previous video, it also checks whether if the protocol has other ways and means of obtaining these assets to meet its payments obligations. In this case, you can see that if the $10 million worth of deposit in the other protocol is actually liquid, the protocol can actually liquidate that and change it to USDC to meet its payments obligation. Similarly, it could also unwind some of its LP positions in something like an AMM to actually meet its payments obligations. So in this case, the protocol is likely to be liquid. There could, however, be exception to this case. For instance, if the deposit is illiquid and the protocol has to sell it at a fire sale at much lower value than what it's worth, for instance, $1 million, it may not be able to meet its payments obligation. Similarly, if the LP position cannot be unwinded into the USDC and the HYPE token, and unwinding the HYPE token into USDC, the protocol may not also be able to meet its payment obligations. Now that you have learned the basics of a balance sheet, let us apply it to several DeFi protocols in our next video.